Oh, Stardate 100305.41. Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a kind of smart, kind of funny podcast covering new and classic Trek. I am your not so possessed by an ancient mass captain for the night, Mariah Gossett. And with me on the view screen, we have
Clyde Haynes, look out for my churros.
and
Anne-Marie Siegel.
thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We are covering the fourth episode of the third season of Lower Decks. But first, I do want to welcome our guest for this evening, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel. We're so excited to have you. Anne-Marie is a lifelong Trek fan and part of the virtual TrekCon and the Seventh Rule podcast teams. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm such a longtime fan. It's just such a smart, thoughtful podcast and also so much fun. I love you guys.
Oh,
and I love the hot freaks animations.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to those in a little bit. We're so excited to have everybody. And Anne-Marie, for those who are just meeting you, I know I've been following you on Twitter for a long time. I always love connecting with other Trekkies online and becoming friends beyond the internet. So it's so exciting when we get new people to join us. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you came to Trek and maybe a favorite Trek memory that you might have.
Ooh, so I became pretty diehard Trek when I was 3 when TNG started. And if I watched Star Trek with my dad at bedtime, I got to stay up an extra hour. So that kind of started it. And TNG was my first love, but I really love all Star Trek. And I'm having a lot of fun rewatching for the millionth time. But Deep Space Nine with Sirach Lofton over on the Seventh Rule. We're just in season 7 now. And then we're starting to plan things for Virtual TrekCon 4, which is going to be February 16th to 20th.
So exciting. What are some of the can you tease any panels or anything coming up for Virtual TrekCon?
I can say for sure right now, we're going to have the second annual Lappy Awards, which are Live Long and Prosper with the Y. And last year's were pretty incredible, and hopefully more it will get more widespread. But we had 3 of the 4 showrunners currently, as well as 20 other guests, and probably Nichelle Nichols' last appearance on camera. It was just very special. So, and basically what we do is we have polls everywhere on Facebook. So we had thousands of Star Trek fans all voting, and then for the preliminary choices, and then for the finals. So it wasn't just us choosing random winners. We had 25 categories of old and new Star Trek and a total Star Trek universe. So funniest moment, things like that, biggest wow moment. So we're just starting to kind of go over categories for this year, which is great because there's been so much new Star Trek.
Yes, I know. We have a bounty of riches when it comes to new Star Trek right now. So I think it's going to be an even more fun year for the Lappies. And I think we'll get some hopefully a few Lower Decks moments in there, because I feel it's really hit its stride this season. Just a couple of reminders. If you are listening to this podcast, thank you so much. We appreciate you. You can find and share this podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of the things. You can find links to our Patreon, as well as links to the audio and video versions of this podcast at StarTrekPod.co. That's StarTrekPod.co. And maybe leave us a little review, a review on Apple Podcasts. I know our patrons know I unfortunately got COVID a few weeks ago, and I still have a little bit of a cough lingering. So I do apologize if that interrupts me mid-speech. I just don't know it's coming. But Clyde, can you take over and tell folks how they can interact in the live chat tonight?
Yes, we love it if you're listening to us. But if you are watching us live on YouTube or wherever you stream your favorite podcast, then you can participate with us here in the show. So just head over and chat us with a capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in the chat, and we will see what you have to comment or questions that you might want to ask. And when that special time comes, and you'll know what it is, just type capital H, capital F, capital HF in the chat, and we'll take a look at your comments.
Amazing. All right, let's grab some cucumbers and try not to set off the stress wristbands and talk about Room for Growth. This episode was directed by Jason Zurich. It was also written by John Cochran, who I don't know if y'all know, but John was a contestant and an eventual winner of the Survivor franchise, which because I was on Wiki and I was like, why is his name blue? And then I clicked it and I was like, oh, has nothing else to do with Star Trek things. It has to do with Survivor. But I thought that was a fun factoid. And I do think it might be time for that part of the show for maybe some hot freaks.
Hot freaks!
Oh, had to go with the deep V. Had to go with the deep V. Emery, what is your hot freak for this particular episode?
So first, I'll preface this by saying I just absolutely adore it. But there was this really weird science error that I've already discussed with Dr. Mohammed Noor, where they confused the words hydrophilic and hydrophobic. And so hydrophilic, like PHIL, means you love something, so it loves water. So they say that there's like a hydrophilic skin barrier, but like that like prevents water from soaking in. But they meant to say hydrophobic, which means like you don't love something or you're scared of something. So super weird. So my hot take is they should have called Dr. Mohammed Noor to like consult for biology.
I wonder if that was just like a slip in the like voiceover booth and like the person directing perhaps maybe didn't know what the difference would be and was like, whatever, you know.
Well, I deep dived like the writer and I saw that he has a JD from Harvard Law. So maybe he only had like one biology question and just like the class and it just like snuck past everybody. I'm not sure, but it's definitely one of those words where you always pause in like undergrad and in med school to be like, okay, let me just make sure I'm saying the right one. So it's kind of a weird, like very much stands out. And Star Trek, like mistakes like that are so few and far between. So that's my hot take, but also I just loved it.
Clyde, what about you?
I love the episode. I thought it was exactly what I needed in the middle of a long day. It was so much fun. I think we're getting even just more bits and bits of kind of character development. I thought it was really cool to see another Cali class ship and how they interacted with kind of the Cerritos crew. And we always look at this crew as this crew that is not well thought of. They're lower decks. They're trying to make it. For a long time, we thought the Captain Freeman was looking to get kind of promoted off a Cali class ship. And now we've seen that the Cerritos is kind of the rock stars of the Cali class. And I thought that was kind of neat. Like I enjoyed a little bit of redemption for them. I love the interaction of kind of Mariner, Tendi, and Boimler as they race through the lower parts of the ship and then kind of interacting with Delta Shift. Like I thought this was a really well constructed kind of plot. You had a couple things going on, and then the very subtle kind of messaging about we all need to take a break. Like it's great to work hard, and I think when we think about Trek, we enjoy their kind of vacation episodes, right? The Risa episodes, which almost always end up turning out not to be an actual vacation and some murder mystery that has plot that has kind of unfolded. And so this was like, no, like you guys really need a break, but how you take a break might be a little different than one would expect. So I really enjoyed this episode from beginning to end. So yeah, that's my hot freak.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed this episode. No surprise to anyone listening, I think. But I very much relate to the engineers in that sometimes you just got to do the work in order to be able to relax, because if the work is piling up, you can't relax. I also love these moments that we get to see in Lower Decks where it's like there is an A plot happening with our bridge crew, but because we are Lower Decks, we don't know every little piece of it and we just feel the effects of it. So I always love when they play with that in this show. And so having the cold open be this like moment where we see repercussions for lower deckers because of the crusades of the bridge crew really hit me in all of the right places. So I really enjoyed this. Let's take a look at what some of the people in the chat had to say. We have Hot Freak. I'd watch a whole episode of the exploits of Tahana, aka Diane, and Shax on the holodeck.
No.
Same.
When I would watch, I love the black and white, the cheesy holodeck moment. It was such a good callback to so many episodes of TNG and Voyager. Hot Freak, I love.
Mariah, I was gonna say I love it. Oh, I think we lost Mariah for a second.
Can you still hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh my gosh! Were you touching ancient masks again?
Yeah, that was great. I like the holodeck. I was just thinking that Shax and Tiana, that's like a Star Trek After Dark episode. Like that was.
Oh my God! I was
that
just
was going
playing,
to place.
Serge Gainsbourg and Bridget Bardot's like Bonnie and Clyde song. I was like playing that in my head during it. It was super hot.
I mean, I thought that like that was. We don't always get a gangster episode where the crew is actually the gangsters, right? And so I thought that was incredibly fun.
Gosh.
So
you never asked me about my dreams anymore.
Yeah. Well, it was, it was this bit of reality in the middle of this action adventure kind of holodeck. And Nicole says, Hot Frank, I love how much more confident Boimler's getting. I mean, bold Boimler seems like a great idea until he loses a hand or something.
My headcanon is that he like did a Google search into like Starfleet logs to get that Cisco quote where he's like, fortune favors the bold. And he's like, ooh, I'll use that sometime.
Yeah. Kind of like, I'll use it all the time. Make that my life's mantra.
Yeah.
No. Let's see. We'll have to leave Nicole's quote up there for a little bit, but some other quotes. They're all a bunch of Geordi LaForges. There you go, Mariah. Mariah's back.
I fixed it. Sorry. I don't.
You're great. We're just about to talk about Chupi's quote. They're all a bunch of Geordi LaForges. Everyone here pretty much knows that Geordi LaForge is like my favorite Star Trek character. So this episode in particular had a bunch of touchstones that were especially special to me. So while I don't love the way they referenced Geordi, I like the fact that they referenced Geordi. Not to mention you had an engineering character with a visor on, and the adolescent engineer in me will take any reference of Dr. Leah Brahms I can get. So keep those coming. So I love that. So I thought that was great.
So digging more into the episode, we kind of set up the idea that there is potentially better rooms on board the ship up on the first floor. There's 4 rooms available in our beta shift lower deckers. Here the delta shift is going to try to game the system, and Tendy's really excited to get into the moral gray area and try to game the system as well. I thought the journey they sort of go through the bowels of the ship reminded me a little bit of like Willy Wonka-esque stuff, because you get the trippy drug moment. You have this room where they think everything is wonderful, and then it starts spinning, right? And everything is not so wonderful. So I thought it was a really fun sort of exploration of these different seemingly unnecessary parts of the ship, but we all know they have purposes. But I like the idea of the retrofits. Nothing's labeled. No one truly knows where anything is on this ship.
Well, I mean, I think what's fascinating about that to me is, as Star Trek fans, it would not surprise me if we all spent a little too long looking at schematics of the Enterprise or Voyager or something like that. It's like, oh, this is where the crew quarters. And I will or will not admit to playing a video game that may have had me walk through a ship or two. I also will not admit or deny that may or may not have been in virtual reality. But what I will say is, all that being established, we never talk about the underpinnings of the ship, right? Like how like the deflector shields and the generation of that. These are all areas like the the incinerator. We just assume these things happen, but we never really talk about that stuff. And this was an opportunity for us to kind of, in Lower Decks fashion, get a little bit of that.
100%. And I did like that they had to like bust through Shax and Tahana's very interesting foreplay scene in order to start their journey. What a first hurdle to have to get through. And I half expected to, when Tahana says safety protocols off, I was waiting for Badgie to appear. But I do want to ask y'all, how do you think she lost her tail?
Oh my goodness. I need to know at some point. But
Right.
this was definitely like my favorite scene of all the whole season, and maybe one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. But I can't stop giggling all day today about like, put those away, Diane.
It felt very like a Cheers moment, you know,
Yes.
like weird dynamic there. And then I did love that like Shax is such a like he's like, I died and we haven't even talked about it.
He's such a softie. I love him so much.
And like even when he's taking Billups, like slapping him in the face and crying in his chest, he's just like, I got you, little baby bear, you know, like
Oh, love it.
It is this great kind of juxtaposition of like Shax as chief of security in this, he's big and strong, and there's a moment, anytime something goes wrong, he's like right there to be like, and then, then you've got Tiana, who is quite literally soft and furry.
but it's so rough on the interior.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
so incredible.
Yeah, their dynamic is really fun. And then we have Rutherford, Billups, and the rest of the engineering crew, along with our captain, going down to the Dove for a little rest and relaxation. But work is definitely how these engineers relax. But of the treatments that they offered, so we had a puppy room, a kitten room for those who are a little more menacing, the like Klingon anger throw things room, a mud bath, and then they had mani-pedi massages and different things going on, a sand area. What would be your relaxation room of choice on the Dove?
What a great question. I mean, I'm allergic to cats, so that definitely would not be relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
The Klingon room is interesting. I've always wanted to try one of those, like not the escape rooms, but they're usually partnered with like a break stuff room, like a destruction room. That's what the Klingon room felt like a little bit to me. The mud thing has never been a thing that I've wanted to really like. That just seems like it might be relaxing, and you got to get it all off you. Like that just seems like a lot. I'd get bored of the sand pretty quickly, I think. I think the mani-pedi massage thing would probably be like right there for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be it.
What about you,
and if they throw a little acupuncture where I can fall asleep, bingo. I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm kind of scared of dogs, which is like embarrassing to admit. And then I'm very allergic to cats. So definitely
no animal rooms.
Yeah, no animal rooms. Definitely the mani-pedi room, because then you like feel good for weeks after. And like I was saying before we started recording, yeah, totally went and got a manicure after watching this episode twice.
I did too.
I did not, but I wish I wish I had.
You had to get a little inspiration from our engineering crew and go get a little mani-pedi moment. Yeah, that's
I love
definitely
your color.
Oh, thank you. Yours is so cute too. For those who are just listening, I have like a light purpley moment going on, and Marie, it looks like yours is like a red.
Yeah, bubbles only.
Cute. Love it. And on the flip side, we have our other crew members. We have Boimler, Mariner, and Tendi. Definitely not relaxing, except for maybe once we get to this bog, as they're making their way through the many decks to try to get to this control panel to put their names on the list for these special rooms. I thought it was so funny as they're like going through this like greenhouse area, and it's like, who comes on a spaceship to play with plants? And I feel like we have so many characters that have
Yes.
plants throughout the Star Trek series that just like love playing with plants in space. There's a whole seed capsule ship on Discovery that we encountered not too long ago.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that one.
But yeah, we get to a moment where Tendi is not feeling the effects of the different gaseousness caused by the plants in this particular area, and we get a fun little acid trippy type of moment with Boimler and Mariner. And I thought it was really funny to see Tendi almost like break her own character in a way, but I feel like we're seeing more of it from her, where she's like whipping Mariner to get out of the area and out of her egg with like a tree branch. And I was like, oh, Tendi, you're getting a little violent here. What's going on?
I feel like it also shows like some growth for Tendi. Like she's confident enough to like take charge of the situation when it needs to be, and sort of go from just like her happy, like really positive, happy-go-lucky self to being like, okay, this needs to get done. It's like a very like time sensitive situation, and then just go back to her normal self. I feel like that's such a cool like juxtaposition of like professionalism without the like hard exterior that sometimes people like mistake for like professionalism has to be like no nonsense. It's more just about confidence and knowing what you know. So I think it shows some really great growth with Tendi, and I love her.
Yeah, I think what I love about this season in particular of Lower Decks is there's a lot of growth in all the characters, right? So I think if we go back to kind of season 1, it was real easy to see them as, oh yeah, these are Lower Decks. They're never going to be, senior officer, bridge crew, galaxy class, kind of all, members of the A plot. But I think what we're seeing is growth. And it's almost as though what they really are almost kind of senior cadets, ensigns, in a way that this is where they start out. Like nobody ends up, as much as we like to think Riker popped out of the academy as Riker, he didn't, right? And so what I'm looking at is you're seeing Tendi, who is it feels like she has a lot less kind of anxiety. Like she's like she's not going around breaking all the rules, but she's definitely seen some growth. Rutherford has figured out how to relax a little bit, has become more comfortable in his own skin. Boimler, as we mentioned before, is much more bold now. And on the flip side of that, we see Mariner, who is at times a little bit more by the book, right? She's really kind of stepping into this role as a bit more of an actual officer. It's kind of like if we just fast forward about 5 or 6 years, you could see them as a really tight group of officers. And so the growth that I'm looking at is just amazing. Like I really like this crew.
Yeah, Chippy brings up an interesting question kind of along these lines. What do you think about Mariner's predictions of where they're all headed professionally? We have Boimler being dead, I think was the bold Boimler's no
if he
longer.
keeps this bold stuff up.
Yeah.
Probably right about that.
Tendi would be a science officer. What did I'm trying to remember her prediction for Rutherford. And then she was like, I'll be kicked off of the ship by now.
Look, I think that we're probably looking at I don't know, if you ever go back and you look at some of the crews, right? Like you look at the Voyager crew, you look at the Enterprise crew, they all have this sense of this deep history, right? That we never really privy to how they got together. And it felt like when you think about one of the J.J. Abrams kind of the early Star Trek episode or movies, we got the sense of how they fell together and became kind of tight. I feel like that's what I'm watching here, is that the future is going to be Mariner as captain, Boimler as her first officer, Tendi as the chief science officer, and Rutherford as the chief engineer, right? Like that's what, and they're going to have these inside jokes, and they're going to be really, really tight. And if we had just picked up, Star Trek Cerritos, then we would know. But because we've had Lower Decks, we'll have seen their growth and how tight they are and why they're so close. That's what I actually think is going to happen. But that's just me.
I also really love that, like, Mariner's sort of the opposite end of Tendi, where like she started off so overly confident and like not knowing when to admit she doesn't know everything. And that's like also kind of like coming down, which I feel like is great character growth and makes her actually more like trustworthy and a better teammate.
100%. And I feel like she's also learning a lot more about herself. Like we saw her sort of like emotional reaction to wanting to help her mom in our season premiere this particular season. And then we've also now seen, I thought it was really interesting when Tendi's like, I'm really sorry I had to break you out of the egg before you were ready. And you kind of see this moment on Mariner's face that's like, yeah, I was not ready to come out of the egg. I was so safe and warm.
It was so warm.
And I think you're seeing Mariner kind of have a little bit of that self-exploration of like, oh, maybe I jumped into like being a lieutenant before I was ready to come out of the egg, you know, and now this is sort of her returning to that warm space of her place in lower decks with her little group of friends who are sort of shepherding her to becoming a better person. Like you were saying, Anne Marie, I agree. I think she's becoming a more well-rounded ensign so that she can be more trustworthy, both as a friend and as a Starfleet officer. So I'm excited to see where she goes. Our crew sort of continues on their journey, and they eventually figure out that it's only one room that is available on the 4th floor and not 4 rooms on the 1st floor. And they decide that they just want to all stick together so that they don't get separated, which I thought was very sweet. And we have our engineers on the Dove figuring out a way to help out their captain. And of course, all their wristbands are green because they had to solve a problem. And I was like, this is the most accurate depiction of engineers I've ever seen in my life.
So cute.
I was like, my friends who are engineers love nothing more than when you give them like weird mind puzzles they have to figure out.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I was Clyde.
I was thinking, it's like, how do I relax? I do work, like personal. It's you know, I at one point I was a computer scientist, and people asked me, well, what made you stop? And I said, well, I realized that the great ones spend all day working as programming, and then when they come home, they program more, just on their personal projects, their side projects, that passion thing that they want. And I was like, yeah, that's how they unwind. That's how they relax. They do that creative bit for them. And so I had to find that for me. But as an engineer, like, that's what it is. Like just like, well, are you relaxing? I'm like, yeah, well, I'm solving this problem that I want to solve because I'm fascinated by it. Like, that's relaxing to me. It's like, what, my family will walk in and say, what are all those spreadsheets? I'm like, stop looking. That's how I unwind. Don't judge me.
I know. I have one of my longest and dearest friends. She's a data engineer, and I remember I was trying to like decide if I wanted to move or change job. I don't remember what it was. I was trying to solve like a problem, and she's like, well, have you made a decision matrix yet? Do you want to make that together? And I was like, this is the most you question you've ever asked me before.
So adorable.
Listen, you have no idea how many models I make for things, from random things. Like,
truly.
What do you think about if we moved here? Oh, I got it. Just give me, I'll be back in an hour. And just like, here's what it would take.
We'll get right back to you. Yes. So way to go, Lower Decks, with the accurate depiction of an engineering department. But I thought it was really sweet, and that they solved this problem to try to save their captain, and that they were like, no, we need you. You're so important to this crew and to us. And I did think it was interesting, the reaction of the captain of the Dove, because I was like, oh, excuse me, sorry, it's the first time I've had to pod at 10 p.m. Central Time. I've been Pacific time for the last few weeks. So I was like, it feels very like capitalistic, this idea of like, oh, we've solved a big problem, but I don't want to release the way to solve this problem.
What was that ship? I was like, what is even going on? It felt so Ferengi.
Yeah, I almost expected, there to be some sort of like, oh, Starfleet has paid for you to go to this, but I was like, we've established early on in the episode that money doesn't exist. They can't even pronounce bank correctly. So
Bonk.
I was like, oh, this is an interesting like twist that this particular captain is just like, oh, absolutely not. I don't want to not have a job anymore.
Maybe it was just to lose a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, very. Or I would have been like, yeah, just have this as like your secret weapon for when none of this works
Oh,
for other
good.
Right.
people, right?
Or use it for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I would use it for myself all the time, every day. That'd be my come home, 10 seconds in the chamber, and then make dinner. Like that'd be the move.
Yeah, you just like literally wash the day away. That sounds great. I did like, so one of my favorite things about Lower Decks is I feel like every time I watch an episode, if I rewatch it, I see and find new details because like the whole like Ransom replicating the batch of churros with the story about Ransom's churro wife from being turned into a caveman, that whole like sub little story, I don't know why, kind of went over my head when I watched it the first time. And then I remember him getting the churros and I was like, oh, is Ransom having like a weird reaction to something that's weird that this like crazy muscle dude is going to eat a bag of churros? And then in the rewatch, I was like, oh my gosh, no, he is making his churro wife again.
Yeah, it definitely took me 2 watches to get Churro Olivia.
Churro Olivia is the wildest name.
Oh my God. I just love also the idea of like what happens when 2 different Lower Decks teams get together. Of course,
Yes.
they have like these crazy stories to tell each other and fill in like bits and pieces of what they see at different times of the day. It's so funny.
Yes, Churro Olivia is.
I'm waiting for someone to cosplay Churro Olivia. I wonder if we're going to get a reveal.
It's just. Yeah, I'm gonna walk away from that one. There's a joke I made in the Slack that I'm just gonna keep walking away from. But yeah, no, I think I you know, I also love the fact that you have these 2 Lower Deck groups coming together and having all of these great stories, because it's so fun when you think about some of our Star Trek heroes and what they must be like, and it's almost like we got to listen in on a blooper reel, right?
Yeah.
Of like what happens when that thing goes wrong, because they can't all, look perfect and be all shiny all the times. Sometimes, Riker walks into the room and trips over something, and it's funny, right? It's like
he goes to throw his leg over a chair and the chair's a little bit taller than he anticipated.
Exactly. This happens, right? It's like Geordi LaForge walks into a wall because he was looking at a data pad, and you want to tease him, but he's blind, so you can't, right? Like there are all these moments that they would have, and we got to listen into the blooper reel a little bit, so I thought it was great.
Yeah, the whole Churro Olivia and like the Lower Deck like story swap thing was really funny to me because it does feel like, I don't know, like almost like when you go to like summer camp as a kid and like each one, if you've been there for multiple years, you have like stories of your camp counselors that you're like sharing around the fire with people, because it's like, and half of it's true and half of it's untrue. And so like when I was on the rewatch, I was like, oh, the churro thing now makes sense. But I was like, why did that? Anyway, the sentence, the churro thing now makes sense, was not one I expected to write down for myself.
No.
I mean, maybe he actually doesn't have a churro wife. And what it is
he's just secretly sneaking and eating a lot of churros.
I look at like, okay, so I'm going to try and bring this back in. So if you think about it, Ransom likes to work out a lot, right? So maybe once a week, he's got a cheat day, and his cheat thing
is churros.
Is churros. So a bag of churros is like
45 hot churros in a nondescript paper bag.
Plus,
I'm trying. I'm really trying here.
And they don't allow open flames on starships unless it's for religious reasons. We can't get like a Yankee candle for his office.
No.
So
I bet it smells delicious in there. The realization though of Mariner about the cinnamon thing was also very
So
funny.
funny. That's like the best thing about watching the second and third time. You hear like all those teeny little things that occasionally, like, I don't think this was one of them, but sometimes like the subtitles can't even keep up. And it's so much fun.
Well, I think the thing that makes it so perfect is it's not an isolated episode. So to me, I'm thinking back to the first couple episodes, right? So Mariner gets in trouble in the first episode. In the second episode, she's assigned to Ransom, right? Ransom has to make sure that she stays on the straight and narrow. So that immediately tells me that she's with Ransom in Ransom's office a lot. So for her to go, man, it does always smell like cinnamon.
Totally.
Like that's hella funny because she's probably in his office more than anybody else. So for her to say it always smells like cinnamon, like that's gold. Like that is absolutely gold, right?
It's the layers of jokes in this show is what makes rewatches so fun because there's always something else that like I didn't pick up on or like those like they're just like almost throwaway one-liners and you're just like, gosh, they're so silly and stupid and smart and I love it.
You know what I think is underappreciated is Tawny Newsom's comedic timing. Right? Because the thing about it is, like we're talking about the cinnamon line, but there's a rhythmic beat to when it dropped, right? And so it was like, oh, like it's like they're telling the story, and it's almost though we're in her head, but she says it out loud, and it's like dun 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 boom, and you hit it, and it's just a belly laugh. And when I think about Mariner has some of the best lines, right? I think Mariner and Rutherford have some of the best like comedic lines, and they have to be delivered on time.
Lise just had one of my other favorite lines of the show is "Keep on puppin',"
oh my gosh.
which is such a great line delivery from Eugene Cordero as Rutherford. And yeah, I hear Eugene Cordero is like everywhere. I feel like I hear his voice in like everything now. So he's staying booked and blessed and busy.
Totally.
And I thought Rutherford's reaction to him being like, we could have shared the one room, all for one and one for all. That's literally what this means.
That was hilarious.
They were just like, well, now that you say it that way, like, of course that's how it could have worked. And I love that, Rutherford was just like, well, let's just go on the adventure again because I didn't get to go on the adventure. So how it can't be that bad as they're all sitting there with their like armpit stained uniforms in the bar at the end.
Anti-grav boy.
Anti-grav boy was super funny. Someone I think in our Patreon brought up, it's interesting that, not to keep going back to churros, but that Ransom gets his bag of churros in the like bar mess hall area. Cause I'm like, wouldn't you have your own replicator in like your quarters to do this privately?
So funny.
But maybe that's part of the appeal for him of his churro wife. It's the secrecy, not so secrecy.
You're trying to pull me in, Mariah. I'm not going to give in. So many jokes. I'm not going to give in.
It was so silly. It was so silly, and I love it. I love when it's stupid silly. Some of my favorites. Was there anything else y'all wanted to kind of dig into about this episode? I thought it was really fun, and I enjoyed it, and it'll definitely be one on my rewatch list for sure, because I think it's just a super fun episode the whole way through.
I mean, I think that I love the touch points in Lower Decks that pokes fun at Star Trek tropes. And so poking fun at the when will you learn not to pick up an ancient mask was perfect for me. Because there are all these little things where it's like, tell me you've read the report that some other captain did that somewhere and it went horribly bad, right? Like no one ever touch a tribble again. Like we know how this ends. And so I love that little moment.
Yeah, there was also, I appreciate someone in our Patreon posted an article today that I thought was going to be like dunking on New Trek, but it essentially was like New Trek has made Trek so much better. It's hard to go back and watch some of the older Trek episodes, especially like the original series and some early TNG. Um, and one of the things that I thought of in watching the episode today of Lower Decks was the moment where they had to make the tether out of their clothes, but there was never any comment about there could have been a really easy joke there about Boimler being, in a tube with two half naked friends, but it wasn't. It was just like, oh my gosh, thank you for saving my life. Moving on. And I was like, oh yeah, this is Trek of now and not Trek of like someone's going to be oogling a space babe,
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
But I do have to say, like, actually, I feel the opposite. Like, new Star Trek is making me really appreciate like TOS, especially Strange New Worlds. Like, I'm going through I haven't seen some of the TOS episodes before, and it's just, I feel like they're very much more watchable because of how invested I am with Strange New Worlds compared to like the level of watchability of some of them before. So I feel like it just all makes all of it better. I love it so much. And sure. I love those little touches like Darcy archives when they like go really specific names from like episodes or like that little like where they're all trying to do the what would your like come like what would your enter line be? And I just thought it was so cute when Mariner and Boimler start like saying like come like Riker. Just all those little touches are so perfect.
Enter friends.
Yeah, no, I mean it is very. I love the references back. I don't know. I have to agree with Mariah a little bit in that I've gone back with the Patreon squad, and some of those TOS episodes is just like, dude. I hate to say it, but sometimes it made me think. Some of these writers might need a girlfriend or a boyfriend because you're writing out a lot of your frustrations on the page here, and just calm down with the dancing half-naked aliens. Like, relax, man. Relax.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's so much of TOS that I do love, like you're saying, Anne Marie, it's like, there are those things that were so like ahead of their times. And then there's those things where it is a product of its time. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's always those like grains of salt, but I love that like Lower Decks and, Discovery and Strange New World are able to take like that foundation of like what was good about those original shows and like propelling it forward. And I love even more how Lower Decks is able to like poke fun at it, but in the way that fans poke fun at it, right? Like we all are getting the joke and it's not at the expense of anybody. It's like we know you're going to get this. So we're going to just leave this here for you. Here's this little breadcrumb.
Yeah. Totally. Strange New World is definitely making me want to go back and experience TOS a little bit because it's making me aware of the holes in my Trek knowledge, because I felt like I really picked up at TNG. Like, I remember being in the room when my mom watched TOS, but like TNG felt like it was mine.
Exactly. Totally, me too.
Strange New Worlds definitely makes me have a greater appreciation for it. And I want to go back and go, okay, well, let me fill in the gaps. It's just, there are these moments, to your point, Mariah, it's not the whole thing, but there are these moments where I look up and go, that is a product of its time, and it didn't age that well. So, but other than that, like I agree. I think the new Trek is making me want more of the old Trek. And I think Lower Decks in particular, because of the references, because of the Easter eggs, like I feel like it is single-handedly responsible for an increase in traffic at Memory Alpha, right? Like, it's like, what was that? I need to know more about that. Where can I find that out? Like, okay, let me go back in here and let me look at this. And so, like, I kind of want to go, well, how many times did they touch an ancient mask? Like, what are those episodes? I'm curious now. So, no, I think it's great.
Plus, I just love masks so much. That's one of my, like, guilty pleasures. So I just love this cold open. Like, so much. So funny.
It's so fun. Awesome, y'all. Well, I think that is it for our coverage of this particular episode of season 3, episode 4, Room for Growth of Lower Decks. We appreciate everyone who's tuned in live this evening for the podcast. We appreciate you if you are listening or watching this later. Thank you so much. You can find us on YouTube every Thursday talking Trek. And of course, we'll be continuing to cover even more Lower Decks for the next few weeks. And then we get some new Prodigy, which I'm really excited for us to sit down and talk about. I think that's going to be really great this October. You can subscribe, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify. Find all the links, including to our Patreon at StarTrekPod.co. Clyde, where else can people find us on the internet?
Well, you can definitely come hang out with us at our very own Patreon channel. So definitely come hang out with us Patreon for $2 an episode. It's $1 and $1, $2. You can be part of our Slack channel, our private Slack channel. You can find us at Twitter as well. Kind of anywhere you want, you can find us at Star Trek Pod. So come hang out and be part of the madness 7 days a week, all the time.
Yes.
Stuff.
And shout out to Karen, who helps run our Twitter account. We appreciate you so much. Anne-Marie, where can people find out more about your work, the upcoming online con, all of that good stuff?
So if you follow me on Twitter at Anne-Marie Segal, Segal, and the number 1, I retweet everything that goes on with Seventh Rule and Virtual Trek Con. But otherwise, definitely follow at Virtual Trek Con. CON, not the other con. Yeah, we're starting to roll out everything, and we'll start having preliminary polls in the next month or so. And we go live at twice a week with guests to talk about news. And there's some overlap with the Seventh Rule and Sirach. So it's a fun time. And we do live chats.
Amazing.
The more Star Trek, the better.
Yes, go follow Dr. Anne-Marie Segal and everything over there at Seventh Rule and the Virtual Con. I'm really excited for that this year. Thank you again for joining us for Star Trek.
Hopefully you guys do a panel.
Yeah, Clyde, we're gonna have to brainstorm. We love doing a panel. Yes, so keep posted on the internets for all things dealing with the Virtual Con and for updates on the Seventh Rule. I know y'all have been releasing the remasters, which has been really fun and cool. So excited to hear those. And I think that's it, y'all. Live long and prosper. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.